Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host, Deb Rivera.
Great, thank you so much. Well, good afternoon and welcome. I hope everyone is having a great Wednesday. My name is Deb Rivera and I work in the communications team for data.census.gov, and I will be the host for today's webinar, Annual Business Survey Data and How to Find It on data.census.gov. Today you will learn about data available in data.census.gov from the Annual Business Survey, which provides statistics about demographic characteristics of the owners of approximately 6 million American employer businesses. And for this webinar event, I am joined by a team of panelists who will be assisting me in answering your submitted questions in the Q&A panel and using the chat to send you helpful links related to today's webinar. During this session, we encourage participants to use the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions related to today's content. And through the chat panel, you may find links and other helpful information. And as a reminder, please do not enter any sensitive information into the Q&A panel. This includes personally identifiable information, business identifiable information, or any other sensitive or personal information. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. We will be allowing one question per participant. Participants who would like to ask a question are welcome to use the raise hand icon, which appears next to your own name in WebEx, and that will prompt us to open up your line. You will then need to unmute yourself to ask your question. And if time allows, and you do have additional questions, you are more than welcome to queue up again. Please note that the Q&A session will focus on the platform, data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on the ABS or 2020 census products or data. As always, we are recording the webinar today, which allows us to post the materials through the Census Academy website. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Tyson Weister. Thank you so much, Tyson.
Great, thank you so much, Deb, and thank you all for joining the webinar this afternoon, Annual Business Survey Data and How to Find It on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work on the communications team in the Center for Enterprise Dissemination, which is the area that has data.census.gov and the API. So with that, we are going to focus the primary portion of today's webinar on a live demonstration. We'll also show you some tips along the way. Then we'll have some common questions, resources for learning more, and then open up for your question and answer at the end. So before we get into that live demonstration, if you're not familiar with data.census.gov or the breadth of information that we offer, I did just want to note here that we have a variety of data sets. So data.census.gov is the primary platform to get data from the Census Bureau. That means we have the most popular surveys and programs. On the left-hand side, I've listed out the different types of economic or business data that we currently have available on our site, as well as the availability by year. As a note here, we have bolded on the left-hand side the annual business survey. We have the data on data.census.gov since its first release in 2017 reference year, up through the most recent 2021 reference year released. Please do know that in data.census.gov, we refer to the annual business survey according to the reference year or year that the data values refer to, rather than the data collection year. So for instance, the 2020 annual business survey data collection year would be referencing data from 2021. Prior to the annual business survey's implementation, the annual survey of entrepreneurs and survey of business owners captured similar information, and we do have some of that historical data available on data.census.gov as well if you'd like to explore. And last thing, if you'd like a detailed listing of all of the data sets, not just the economic ones, I have included a link here with that availability chart. So moving forward for today, our objective is for you to be able to access annual business survey data tables, select filters using NAICS industry codes and different economic data sets related to ABS products, read the table layout and customize the view, create maps and save your results. So the thing to note here, if you haven't explored annual business survey data in detail, the layout of these tables, as well as pretty much all of our economic data tables on data.census.gov, are a little bit different than the demographic tables. So this is where really spending a lot of time to patiently read the different columns and rows as well as customize the view is helpful. And I do want to note before I get into the live demonstration, there's two ways to go about searching on our site. We do have a single search bar, but today we're going to focus specifically on the advanced search. We're going to use it because it's the most precise way to select the search criteria that we're looking for. It includes all available options, including those industry codes, and it's guided approach. So I don't have to come up with my own words and phrases. I can click through items that pique my interest and click a checkbox to make a final selection. So for the demonstration today, again, the annual business survey covers characteristics of businesses and business owners. So pretty much all of the tables, certainly all the ones that we're referencing today, will provide those characteristics broken out by the sex, race, ethnicity, and veteran status of the business or business owners. So we're going to focus on that first, and then as we dive through into examples 2 and 3, I'm going to show you more complex features of the site, as well as more complex data tables from the annual business survey that you can access. But to get started, we are going to just pull up a table for veteran-owned firms for all two-digit NAICS codes in the United States from the annual business survey company summary product. So on the live site, we'll go to data.census.gov. That will take you to the landing page. And I mentioned that we're going to focus today on the advanced search. So you'll look for the advanced search link below the single search bar. We also call the advanced search filters. So you'll see a filter panel on the left-hand side. They mean the same thing. On a high level, there are different categories to click through: geography, topics, surveys, years, and codes. So for this first option, we wanted to spell out the annual business survey data product. So if you go to the surveys heading, you'll see a section called economic surveys. So we'll click there and then follow the prompts through. We see the first option says annual business survey, and then it gives the 5 different products to choose from. If you're not sure where to start, or if you want to start with the most basic type of annual business survey table, I highly recommend checking out the company summary product. So do know you need to make that click and check the box in order to make a final selection, and we see the filter in the upper left. Moving on, the next thing that we'll do is select the industry codes that we're interested in, or the NAICS codes. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a section called Codes and Industry Codes NAICS. Here we can drill into the different options to choose from if you wanted to choose something very specific, or even get into more detailed categories. You could click through these options. I just want to pull up the data for all available 2-digit NAICS codes, so I'm going to check the box that says 2-digit NAICS. So with those 2 filter selections for the data set and the NAICS codes, I'm ready to run my search. If you don't select a geography, it will default to providing data at the national level. So I'll click the search button in the lower right, and then I'll choose the Tables tab at the top. There are 22 table results from this product. Before we dive into them, I just want to point out Typically, you'll see the most recent data towards the top of your list. So you see the tables that say AB21, that means it's the 2021 vintage reference year of the annual business survey. And there are a few different tables. One ends in CSA01, another one ending in CSA02, all the way up to CSA05. So there's 5 tables for the company summary product from the annual business survey. And then as you scroll down further, you'll see AB20 for the 2020 vintage, AB19, etc. I want to deal with the most recent data. So I'm going to click into that very first table, AB2100 CSA01. And the 01 tables typically give you the most general information for that particular product. And it's a really great starting point, especially keeping in mind that these tables are relatively complex compared to other types of tables on our site. So we've clicked into the table, but we're getting this message that says table is too large to display. When you see this, do not be discouraged or overwhelmed. All you want to do is look for the link that says open the table. So you'll see it at the bottom of this message. You may need to click it twice in order for it to register, and give it a second. So essentially that message is telling you that it may take longer than expected for the table to load. You shouldn't really have problems getting the table to load eventually. And we're looking at our first annual business survey table. So before I get too far into the detail, I just want to point out at a high level what's going on here. You see a lot of different columns that are left aligned. And if you scroll to the right of your table, you'll see different numerical values in columns with right aligned data. So your left aligned options are what we call dimensions. So each unique combination of geography name, industry code, male versus female sex code, ethnicity code, race code, each unique combination of those dimension columns will give you one data row for your table. And based on that, we have 4,436 data rows in this particular table. So it's pretty large. And once you scroll to the right, for each of those unique combination of details, you will see the corresponding data values. This particular table provides the number of employer firms, their sales of those businesses, number of employees, annual payroll, and some information about data quality. So in most cases, you're not going to want to actually make use of all 4,436 rows in any particular table, and you'll want to narrow this down a bit. So for our analysis, we were looking at veteran-owned firms. So what we'll want to do is collapse the level of detail in this table. When you hover over a particular column, you'll see 3 horizontal bars. I'm going to zoom in a little bit farther. And when you click the 3 horizontal bars, you'll have a pop-up option. One of the options will have a filter icon, and here's where you can tell the site that you only want to keep certain values. So in this case, I just want to keep the total. I don't care about differentiating between male or female-owned businesses for this particular analysis. So if you click the Select All button, it will deselect or select all of the checkboxes, and then you can mark the one that you want to keep. In this case, I just want to keep total, and you do need to click the apply button to make that register. Now, before I click apply, what this is going to do is condense the number of rows. So it's going to go from 4,436 all the way down to 1,750. We can continue this process by applying total to the meaning of ethnicity code and meaning of race code. Because ultimately, I just want to look at all of veteran-owned businesses. So if I repeat the process, each time I'm going to end up with fewer and fewer data rows. I'm down to 709 now. Repeating this process, hover over meaning of race code, click the 3 horizontal bars, the filter icon, deselect them all, mark the total, the one I want to keep, and click apply. Now we go from 700 and some change to 84 rows. The last thing I want to do is keep the veteran value for this particular column. So hovering over the 3 horizontal bars will do just like we did before, but instead of checking the total box, I'll check the veteran box and click apply. And what we're left with is, out of those 4,000 data rows, the 21 that we're actually interested in. So it shows us the different NAICS industry sectors. It's showing us just total veteran-owned businesses, and then we get the data on the right-hand side. The last thing I wanted to point out as far as a site feature, as you scroll right and left, notice that your columns don't stay in view. However, you have the option to pin any one or more than one of our columns to either the left side or right side of your screen. You'll do the same type of process by click the 3 horizontal bars, and then you'll see a pin column. And here's where you choose if you want to keep that column in view to the left or right side of your screen. I'm going to do it for these 2 NAICS because that's the difference in the 21 data rows that we're looking at. And now when we scroll right and left, we have that context. So the last thing I wanted to point out is, now that we have the data, you can also click any of these numerical values. The column header will show the information in ascending or descending order. So we can see the total veteran-owned employer firms is 304,823 based on the annual business survey reference year 2021. And out of that total, we can see the highest sector is professional, scientific, and technical services, followed by construction, healthcare, and social assistance, and retail trade. So a couple things to note before we move on to our next example. Again, just to reiterate, your data variables in your economic tables on the right-hand side of your screen, or the right-hand side of the table, and their right aligned columns. They can be continuous or categorical, but they're typically numeric values that you'll see. That's the data you're getting for your table, and then your dimensions are all of those left aligned columns where each unique combination of values from those left aligned columns create a data row for your table that you're able to access the data for. Another thing I wanted to note here is the annual business survey, like most economic programs, cover businesses with paid employees. If you want the total picture of veteran-owned businesses in the United States, you would also want to check out the non-employer data, potentially. The non-employer statistics by demographics company summary specific table would give you that information on a high level, and that would capture the self-employed veteran information as well. So you can see there's, in this table, it's showing 1,382,000 veteran-owned non-employer firms. So these are self-employed or independent contractor types of businesses. Right, so moving on, our first example covered a single geography across multiple NAICS codes. In this example, we're going to pull up multiple geographies across one NAICS code. So I'm going to look at Hispanic-owned firms across all states in a table view to start. So back to the live site, anytime you click in the upper left, it will restart you fresh from the landing page, and we'll choose the advanced search. We're going to follow a similar process, starting with the economic surveys, annual business survey, and choose the company summary product. Next, I'm going to choose state on the left-hand side and mark all states. And the last thing I'll do is specify my NAICS code. So on the left-hand side, industry code NAICS. In this case, I just care about the overall total. I don't care about breaking out to individual sectors, so I'll choose 00 total for all sectors. So we have our 3 filters: our product, geography, and NAICS code. We'll click the search button in the lower right, then choose tables at the top. So not surprisingly, this takes us to the same table that we looked at last time, the Annual Business Survey 2021 reference year, table ending in CSA01. We get a message about the table being too large to display, but we know not to worry too much about that and click the Open the Table link. Sometimes twice. And then since we added multiple geographies, you'll notice it took a little bit longer for the table to load. This one has 10,000 plus rows to the particular table. And I'm interested in looking at the Hispanic. So ultimately, what you can do is hover, just like we did before, over those 3 horizontal bars and follow the similar process by keeping the value you're interested in for your analysis, in this case, Hispanic-owned businesses, choose Apply. Sometimes, depending on how large the remaining table is, you'll get this message once again. So you'll need to kind of repeatedly go through this process where you click Open the Table and apply additional custom filters to narrow those values down and decrease your data rows. But notice it did decrease from 10,000 data rows to a little over 1,000. So I'm just going to go through these remaining clicks relatively fast. We're setting the other options all to total, and just the ethnicity code will be Hispanic. So we have sex, race, and now veteran will be set to total. And ultimately, that is going to get us down to the 51 rows of data for each of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. Again, as we scroll right and left, you may find it handy to pin the geography column to the left-hand side so you have that context as you're making sense of the data. So in this example, we can see for Alabama, there were 1,177 Hispanic-owned employer firms. And again, if you'd like to sort the information, you can see some of the top states in terms of number of Hispanic-owned employer firms. And now we're going to talk about how you can make maps of this information. Now, we talked a lot about data variables versus dimensions. They not only show up in the table differently, they also are separate in your maps. So when you click into the variable for your maps, you'll see the top list of items will be the data variables. So those are those right aligned columns from your particular table. All of our maps are table based, by the way. And then when you click and look a little bit further, you'll see just below the list of variables that appear at the top is a section called dimensions. And here's where you'll see those remaining left-aligned columns in the corresponding table will be drop-down menus, and they automatically populate based on the table that you're clicked into. So with that, let's go ahead and show how we can map out the total Hispanic-owned firms across all states. From the table view, and again, before you create a map, a lot of times it's helpful to familiarize yourself with the table. Once you get there, you can click the Maps tab at the top. What you want to do from here is make sure that you're clicked on the left-hand side into the table that has data you want to make a map of. On the right-hand side, you'll want to make sure your map is set to the correct boundary. Here we can see we're looking at states. It's included on the legend of our map, and it's also, if you click into the layer button, you can confirm state has been selected. So most of those steps happen automatically for you. The main thing that you want to pay attention to in the upper left is your data variable drop-down menu. So you can click in the upper left and we'll see what I was showing on the slide deck earlier, where we have the different data variables at the top. We can look at data for the number of employer firms, sales, number of employees, etc. and then your dimensions are included below. You may find it helpful to increase or decrease the zoom level for your browser by navigating to it or using keyboard shortcuts. Control plus or Control minus may enhance your view. So right now it's mapping out the total number of employer firms across all states, and you want to verify the context for which it's mapping that out below through the dimensions. It has set all of the items to total, except it's already recognized that we had applied the custom filter in the table to Hispanic, and it's carried that selection over automatically. But you can make changes to any of these options just like we did through the table filtering process by clicking the drop-down menu and choosing a different selection. But in this case, we're all set with our selection, number of employer firms, and it's set to Hispanic. So we are looking at that data already. We can see states with darker shades of blue have higher number of Hispanic-owned employer firms. And if you click on an individual geography, you can see a value. So California has 88,920 Hispanic-owned employer firms. All right, so far we have dealt with data from the company summary product. So do be mindful that the annual business survey covers other characteristics of businesses and business owners besides sex, race, ethnicity, and veteran status. And that's where you want to drill into some of the more detailed tables. For this final example, I'm going to show you a table that talks about coronavirus pandemic impact to business sales in the United States overall, and we'll look at it for the New Orleans metro area. It's from a product called the Annual Business Survey Module Characteristics of Businesses. So on the live site, we'll click the US Census logo in the upper left, and I'll choose the advanced search once again. On the left-hand side, we'll see economic surveys, annual business survey, and then module characteristics of businesses. Just like before, I'm interested in the total impact for businesses. So for the industry codes NAICS option, I'm going to choose once again 00 total for all sectors. And then I need to choose my geographies. You can see on the left-hand side, under geography, it says nation, and I can click United States. Also wanted to show you here, there is a button that says all geographies. So if you click all geographies and click the summary levels tab at the top, it will narrow down to just the geographic levels that are compatible with the data set we've already selected. So this particular annual business survey product are provided for 3 types of geographic areas shown here. And this view hides the remaining 200 plus geographies that the Census Bureau offers in general. So a useful tip if you're maybe having trouble getting to the correct geography, all geography and summary levels may help you see that availability more clear. In this case, we'll click 310 Metropolitan Statistical Area, Micropolitan Statistical Area. It will load a alphabetical listing of all of the metro micro areas in the US, so we could scroll to New Orleans, or you can make use of this search bar at the top of the panel, type in some language, and ultimately mark a checkbox for the option that fits. So New Orleans Metairie metro area. With our selection, we'll review 1 data set, 1 NAICS code, and 2 geographies. I'll click Search in the lower right, and then I'll click Tables at the top. So this is taking us to a different set of annual business survey data tables. These one end in MCB, 01, 02, etc. And at first glance, a lot of these annual business survey tables look the same because, as I mentioned, they all break out the information by sex, ethnicity, race, veteran, etc. However, when you get farther on the right-hand side of the tables, with these additional products and tables, you'll see more detailed characteristics are included. So in this case, what sets this particular table apart from the table that we looked at earlier is there is a meaning of question description code and some different values associated with those options. So for instance, it's showing these different 4 categories of questions that were included and the different response options available, in addition to breaking this out by those characteristics that we saw earlier. So with that in mind, you could click open the table and sort the columns like we've been doing, but I did want to show you when you get this table's too large to display message, I didn't point it out earlier, but you can also filter the columns of your table using this pop-up window on the right-hand side of your screen. So rather than click open the table and filter from the column heading, you can click, for instance, meaning of sex code, choose total and apply, and then choose meaning of ethnicity code, total, apply, meaning of race code, total, apply. And you may find that is just more intuitive, faster, fewer clicks for you compared to doing it from the column heading. I like to do the column heading and make the extra clicks just so I can visually see the table layout as I go. But do know this is accessible to you. You can click the filter button at the top of the table in order to see this option appear as well once the table starts showing up. So we could continue to make our selections here. I left off with veteran. I needed to apply that I just want to keep the total veterans. And then for filter, what I want to keep is the question meaning of question description code for COVID, EFF, or COVID effects. And click apply. So here's where you get the table result. It has the United States first, and then our New Orleans metro area below. I'll go ahead and pin this to the left side of my screen so we can make sense of the information. We set all these columns to totals except the meaning of question description code was set to COVID EFF. And what that provides is this characteristic of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on business sales. So the first option is just, a total summary, but below that is showing you the breakouts. So businesses that reported their sales increased significantly due to the coronavirus pandemic through reference year 2021, increased somewhat, had little to no change, decreased somewhat, or decreased significantly. So here's where I was mentioning you get that additional detail depending on the particular annual business survey table you're clicked into. And just to take a look at this analysis, we can see at the national level, 5.1% of employer firms in reference year 2021 had reported that business sales significantly increased versus 4.2% for the New Orleans metro area. And if you look at business sales decreased significantly due to the pandemic, that was 21.4% of employer firms in the US, and New Orleans metro area had 28.8%. So it kind of makes sense that a tourist and travel oriented area would have a higher percentage in that particular year. And then the last thing, so far we've been dealing with the tables that end in 01. The same concept applies as you click into tables 02 and 03. What you can expect are tables that look similar to the table that ends in 01, but there's going to be another layer of detail in these tables. So for instance, the table in 02 has the characteristics by sex, ethnicity, race, veterans that we're used to seeing. It also has the question description that we see from this particular module characteristics product. But this table also happens to tell us information and break out the data by the meaning of years in business. So you can see, you could look at the impact of COVID sales on firms based on how long they've been in business. Businesses in less than 2 years, 2 to 3 years, etc. In all cases, I recommend starting out with the most basic general tables first and work your way into more detail later on. And we'll talk about that here in the slides. As we start getting to some common questions that we get from people accessing these tables, we talked about the basic common question, what if I get the tables too large to display? We know by now that we just look for the open the table link and click it. But moving on to data requests that may be a little bit too detailed, do keep in mind that the Census Bureau isn't allowed to provide information that could potentially identify any particular business. So we have particular data quality standards and confidentiality standards. So what that means in terms of accessing data from the annual business survey and how you may see that reflected on data.census.gov. One way you could see that your request is too detailed. In this example, I've pulled up the 2019 annual business survey product for Tennessee, and we're looking at Hispanic-owned businesses in Tennessee. But rather than the basic table, I went to the table that ends in 04, and this table also breaks out those Hispanic businesses by how many employees work in the firm. So if your request is getting too detailed, you may start to see, instead of data values, notice we don't see the number of employer firms, we see a S or a D. If you go to the notes section of the table, by clicking the note button, it will explain what those mean. But that's one example that your request is getting a little too detailed. Another way that you may see this missing or see this too detailed request is that a data row may be missing from your table entirely. So notice here that we see data rows very cleanly up to 50 to 99 employees, but after that, we don't see any data for firms with 100 employees through 499 employees. All of those data rows don't meet standards, and none of the data are available for those particular rows, so they're just missing from the table completely. It's not an error in the site, it just means that you're accessing data that's very detailed and is not available for the reasons I mentioned earlier. The last way that you could see this is if you access the table that is available for a particular combination of geography and product, but you applied filters that in combination were so detailed that 0 data rows resulted from the table, in which case you would see, rather than a tables not or too large to display message, you would see data not available. Anytime that you're running into either of these 3 situations, special values, missing rows, or data not available for an entire table, our recommendation would be to access more general annual business survey tables, so the tables that end in 01, the company summary, access data for higher levels of geography. So if you were trying to get metro area data, maybe you go up to the state level or the nation, or more high-level NAICS codes. So if you were trying to do a 3-digit NAICS code, you go up to a 2-digit or maybe a 00 total. So hopefully those tips are helpful as you're trying to access the data on your own. Do know that we continue to provide updates to data.census.gov. You can click a feedback button below the single search bar and shoot us an email to census.data@census.gov with your suggestions on how we can make the site work better for you. We'll also answer your data questions through that email box. To stay up to date on the latest educational opportunities, system releases, and data updates to our site, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter by visiting the QR code or clicking the link. Choose data.census.gov updates, and we will include you through our communications. And today what we focused on was a live demonstration specific to annual business survey data. If you'd like some hands-on practice, we have a variety of workshops on how to use the site. This will allow you to view a short demonstration, get an exercise, time to work on it independently, and then you'll come back together as a group with plenty of time for questions and answers. These are anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length. We have basic, advanced, and mapping workshops on data.census.gov, as well as a workshop on the microdata access tool and a workshop on the application programming interface. We do offer these workshops monthly, so if you're not seeing a specific time that works for you, please check back regularly, and they are, of course, free to join. And with that, I will turn it over to Deb as we start getting ready to transition to your questions. Thank you so much. And Deb, if you are speaking, we can't hear you just yet.
Thank you, Tyson. My apologies. All right, so in just a few moments, we will begin our question and answer session. Today, we will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. So just a few reminders, we are initially taking one question per participant, and this just ensures that we allow enough time for everyone to ask questions. So if you would like to queue up for a question, please use the raise hand icon, and that's located right next to your name or at the bottom of the WebEx screen. That will prompt us to open up your line. Just remember to unmute yourself. So while you all gather your questions to queue up, I would like to take a moment to invite you all to share your thoughts about today's webinar through an evaluation survey. You already know that your feedback is invaluable to us, and it also helps us design future training sessions and also lets us know how we can improve on our webinars. So I'm going to go ahead and send out the evaluation link through the chat panel so you can all access it while we are taking questions from the audience. And now, if you have any questions remaining after our session concludes, please feel free to reach out to one of the email inboxes listed here. Members of the media may contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. If you are a member of the public, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination for training requests and general questions about data.census.gov. And we've also provided the email address for questions related to the annual business survey, and you may contact them at adep.annual.business.survey@census.gov. So with that, let's go ahead and transition and see if we have any questions. All right, it doesn't look like we have anybody queued up, but we did receive a very good question, Tyson. I will go ahead and read it out loud for you. The question reads, how do you know the definition of a specific code, like the one Tyson just showed, for example, COVIDEFF?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I am still sharing screen here. I'm going to go back to the table. So I found that out by playing around with the table. So filtering to a particular column in the table and then seeing the different categories of information. But with that said, there are some other sources that you can get this information from depending on the product that you're clicked into. So if you click the notes button at the top of the table, sometimes you'll see it's broken out here. For instance, this table breaks out all of the categories available for sex, ethnicity, race, veteran status. And as you scroll through, sometimes you'll see additional information here that can be found. So in this case, it's pointing us to technical documentation. So we'll go ahead and visit that page. And here is, this looks like it's different tables that provide the information across those different categories. So this is taking you to filtered view of the table. I don't particularly see in this table where it breaks out the different sources for that category, but a lot of times you will see it. I'm just going to pull up one other product here because I have seen more details in some of the other products. So we'll do the characteristics of businesses. And I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to show the notes button specifically. There's lots of helpful information, especially in economic data tables and the annual business survey table specifically. You'll see all kinds of links to the technical documentation and different explanations. I had mentioned earlier those special characters that appear in the table like S or D. Those are defined in the notes section. We'll just give this table a second to load and I'll take a peek at the notes and wrap up the end of your question in just a second. Okay, so here's another table where it shows, again, the data items. These are the right aligned variables, the different characteristics in this particular table. And then you see different description codes and explanations for them. So as you can see, some of the tables provide a little bit more context than others, but I would definitely encourage you to play around with the filters on the table, look at the remaining information that's displayed for you after filtering, check out the notes, and then if there's any additional technical documentation, we do have a member of the annual business survey on this call who can chime in, but I don't know that there is anything else to offer. And you can also write us in if you'd like more detailed information, but hopefully that gave you a good start in answering that question for you.
Yeah, I'm also going to send a couple of links to the person. This is Concepcion. Hi, everyone. To the person that had that question, Joanne. And I'm also answering other questions in the chat. So I'm on it. I will make sure to send it to the email she provided to us. Joanne, if you're listening, make sure to include your email so I can get back to you with a couple of links that will help you get the meanings of all this coding that we have.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Concepcion. All right, and I'll do one more call. Let's see if anybody has a question and would like to ask over WebEx audio, please make sure to use the raise hand icon. In the meantime, we did receive another interesting question, Tyson. The question reads, can we get information from, say, 1990 or 1980?
I'm not sure the answer to that question. My area of expertise is how to access the data on data.census.gov. The historical comparability, if you're looking at characteristics of business and business owners that we covered outside of the coronavirus pandemic example, would be comparable to the survey of business owners. And I'm not sure when that particular product started or if it had a predecessor.
This is Concepcion. I don't think, and I was just getting on that, answering that question on the chat. I don't think we have that information that far out, honestly, but I can double check, but I doubt that we have it from those years. Because this is a survey that is it's done by the Census Bureau, but it's a sponsor also by the National Science Foundation. And I don't think back then they were doing this survey. But I can double check, but I doubt that it was done that far out. But I can double check for Laurette Travers, I think is the person that had that question. If you can kindly drop your email and I'll get back to you on this for sure. Thank you, Tyson.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then one more question, Tyson, that came in through the chat. and it reads, can we have data on numbers of newborn enterprises per year and their financial results, or number of employees in consequent years, for example?
What I can say that I know about this process that you may be interested in, there's a product called Business Dynamics Statistics that hits on this topic about kind of new businesses. And I think there's also, that's a one that we have on data.census.gov. So that's why I bring that up first. There also is surveys and programs outside of that, possibly even outside of the Census Bureau. I believe the Bureau of Labor Statistics is involved in some information about births and deaths of businesses that you may want to consider. But I don't know a specific answer to your question beyond that. So I would encourage you to write us in with your question and we can research it more fully and get back with you.
Thank you so much, Tyson. Okay, and I'll do one last call for any questions through the audio. All right, I don't see anything coming in. Thank you, Tyson. And that is all the questions that we have for today.
Great. I wanted to, before we wrap up, let you know about an additional resource available from census.gov/academy, the Data Dissemination and Training Branch. There are local data dissemination specialists across the country. So if you're a local organization and would like further follow-up training, these specialists conduct training on a variety of topics not related to any one particular tool or topic. If you'd like to reach out to them, you can reach them at census.askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. And thank you all so much for joining the webinar today. We appreciate your engagement and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Tyson. Thank you, everyone.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.